Hello and welcome to this edition of the weekly market review. What we seek to do here is to ensure that we go through high impact fundamentals with a view to understanding them and how they'll be shaping the market this week. I think that this week will be a very busy week fundamentally, especially on Tuesday, on Thursday, and on Friday. For Tuesday, by 8 a.m., as early as 8 a.m., we'll be having claimant count change for the British pound. A claimant count change would be seeking to monitor employment change or unemployment rate. The way it works is it looks at the number of persons that apply for unemployment benefits. That way it can tell the unemployment rate. Now, GBP, is interesting to know that the British pound has experienced some weeks of weakness. Especially last week was a bit weak, or it was quite weak against the US, was weak against the Japanese yen, it was weak even against Canadian dollar. Now, this particular news would signify or let us know if there's going to be a change in that weakness. I personally think that if there is a fall in the forecast already is giving us a downward trend, which means that there's a high chance that when this data comes out, it could still give further weakness to GBP. Push it back to the downtrend where we've noticed that it's been comfortable recently. So that's 8 a.m. on Tuesday, November 11th. Now, for Thursday, by 1:30 a.m., AUD, Australian dollar, will release their data also. And they'll be releasing two data at that same time. They'll be looking at employment change and unemployment rate. You see both of these things monitoring the same thing, where unemployment change is looking at the increase or decrease in the number of employed persons, while unemployment rate will be looking at how many persons are actually unemployed. Now, this is a monthly data. They'll seek to compare it against what we have for last month. The forecast here shows that there's likely going to be a decrease in the unemployment rate. Now, that's a good thing. If unemployment rate drops, it means that more persons are employed. So it's very possible that 1:30 a.m. We could see some positive move in Australian dollar. Australian dollar also gathered a bit of strength early last week, but retraced a bit, especially against pairs like the dollar and all that. So you could see this give it the needed boost in it for the rest of the week. So employment change, unemployment rate on AUD by 1:30 a.m. on Thursday. That same Thursday will be exciting because GDP will return after Tuesday. We'll have GDP data on the Great British Pound. Now, GDP is gross domestic product. We'll be looking at the total value of products produced in the UK. Looking at the fact that we said for last week and even week before, there's been some level of weakness in GBP. They released their rates, their interest rates, and they maintained it. And it still gave a bit of weakness to the dollar. So there's a level of inflation in that place where we've seen some level of weakness. And if this data comes out, the forecast is around 0.0%, which means there's no change at all in GDP. I think that this goes in line with the downward trend we've seen GBP experiencing recently, and it could actually continue that downward trend. The rest for Thursday is actually focused on the dollar. Now, for the dollar, it's quite interesting because if you check Forex Factory, you see that the time there is tentative. Okay, we have a tentative time, we have a tentative date there. And the reason is because there's actually a shutdown of government because they've had some issues with passing some bills into law that especially affect the workers in the United States. And because of this, we have some level of stalemate, and that's why we have this tentative. It's not really sure if this data will come out. I don't think I know that NFP did not come out last week. Even last month, NFP was not introduced. But this data is CPI, and last month we actually had CPI, even with the shutdown. So it's very possible that this data come out. The dollar has been gaining some bit of strength. Just towards the end of last week, it's retraced a bit, but it's still projected to continue its strength. Now, if this data comes out the way we see it, where last month there was actually a drop in the level of inflation. If it comes out that way, we could see continued strength. Don't forget that the US has been battling inflation since post-COVID and seems to be winning that war because we've seen some continuous decrease in the rate of inflation. So we could actually get a stronger dollar and dollar could continue bullish move. Apart from CPI, we also have unemployment claims that will be coming out Thursday. So it will be fun to watch. We hope to see that data released. I think this will be very clear, say Monday or Tuesday, to know what time exactly this data will be coming out. And then on Friday, we continue with the tentative spell of the dollar, where we're expecting PPI, we're expecting core retail sales, we're expecting retail sales. Now, all these data are still tentative because, like I explained, we have a little bit of issues due to the government shutdown. Okay, now this is why we still have tentative. Now, one thing I want to mention is the difference between CPI and PPI, because why CPI monitors inflation for consumer goods, PPI monitors inflation for producer goods, more like raw materials. So most times you see them moving towards the same direction, because increase in producer goods will actually lead to increase in the price of consumer goods, right? So at the end of the day, I think that this should actually work in the same line. I think that this data should give strength to the dollar. Of course, it always makes sense to wait till the data is released for you to make that decision. But it's going to be very interesting trading time in the market. I think the dollar will return to strength in the next week against other peers. Yes, but these are the high impacts that we'll be having this particular week. Of course, stay tuned and make sure you seize as much opportunities as possible. Remember that here at Rally Trade, every day we seek to analyze the market by 8 a.m. So, of course, you'll be getting daily market information to ensure you're not stranded at all. I'll see you next week.